Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Allie stood frozen outside the hospital room door, her heart pounding so hard she could almost hear it echoing in her ears. The sterile hallway of Memorial Hospital felt colder than ever, each fluorescent light flickering slightly as if to mirror the confusion and fear that had consumed her since the news broke. She had spent the last 48 hours trying to convince herself that it wasn't true, that there had been a mistake, that somehow this was all part of another one of those dramatic misunderstandings that seemed to swirl endlessly around Genoa City. But when Sharon called her, her tone heavy with sympathy, Allie knew it was real. Noah had been in a car accident, and now he didn't remember her. Not her smile, not her laugh, not the way he once whispered that he couldn't imagine a day without her. The cruel twist of fate was that she had come here with life-changing news, something she had only just found the courage to share. She was pregnant with Noah's baby. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the door handle, unsure if she could do this. She'd rehearsed what to say in her head countless times. She imagined him smiling, shocked but happy, wrapping his arms around her, whispering promises that they'd figure it all out together. But now that version of Noah, the one who looked at her like she was his future, was gone. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive, but the trauma had taken his memories. They warned her that seeing familiar faces might confuse him, that he might not react well. Yet how could she stay away when every heartbeat inside her reminded her of him? She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Noah lay propped up against the pillows, looking pale and lost. The sight of him hit her like a punch to the chest. His once vibrant eyes seemed distant, like a stranger's. Sharon sat beside him, gently stroking his hand as she spoke softly. When Sharon looked up and saw Allie, her expression shifted. Relief, concern, and something else, a deep sadness. "Allie," Sharon said quietly, rising to her feet. "I didn't know if you were coming." Allie swallowed hard, forcing herself to nod. "I had to," she whispered. Sharon's gaze softened. "He's awake, but he doesn't remember much. Just take it slow, okay?" Allie moved closer to the bed, her heart aching as Noah's eyes flickered toward her. There was no spark of recognition, no warmth, only polite confusion. "Hi," he said carefully, as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. "Do I know you?" The words sliced through her. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "Yeah," she managed to say. "You used to." Noah blinked, clearly trying to piece something together. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "The doctor said my memory's fuzzy. Everything feels like a dream I can't quite wake up from." Sharon quietly slipped out of the room, giving them privacy. Allie sat down beside him, the silence thick between them. "It's okay," she said softly, though her voice broke on the last word. "You've been through a lot." Noah studied her, his brow furrowed. "You look familiar," he admitted. "Like I should remember you." Allie let out a shaky breath. "We've spent a lot of time together," she said. "You mean something to me." Noah's lips curved into a small, uncertain smile. "Were we friends?" She hesitated. "More than that," she whispered. He blinked, confusion flickering again. "More." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "You loved me, Noah. And I loved you." The weight of her confession hung in the air, heavy and raw. Noah looked down at his hands, as if trying to summon memories buried deep inside. "That's hard to believe," he said finally, his voice small. "It feels like I'm hearing someone else's story." Allie wanted to reach out and touch him, to remind him with her hands, her warmth, her presence, but she held back. "It was real," she said. "Everything we shared, it was real." He looked at her again, and for a fleeting second, something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of the man she loved. But then it was gone, lost behind the fog of confusion. She could barely breathe. How was she supposed to tell him now? The secret that had been growing inside her wasn't something she could keep much longer. She had come here today to tell him that their love had created something new, something pure. But now, with him staring at her like she was a stranger, how could she possibly say the words? She tried to imagine how he would react. Would he be horrified? Would he accuse her of lying, of making it up? The thought made her stomach twist. Yet she knew she couldn't keep it from him. He deserved to know. "Can I tell you something?" she said softly. He nodded, curious but cautious. "Sure." She took a deep breath, pressing a trembling hand against her stomach as if to steady herself. Before the accident, she began, we found out something. I was waiting for the right time to tell you, but then everything happened so fast. He tilted his head, his brow knitting together. What do you mean? Her throat tightened. I'm pregnant, Noah. The room fell silent. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor seemed to grow louder, filling the void between them. Noah blinked, clearly blindsided. You're what? He asked as if he hadn't heard her right. She forced herself to meet his gaze. I'm carrying your baby. The words hung in the air like a confession, fragile and powerful. His eyes widened, his face pale. I don't understand, he said, shaking his head. You're saying, I'm the father. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes. Noah looked away, his mind clearly spinning. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. How could this be true when I don't even remember you? Allie's heart cracked open at the sound of his voice, the disbelief cutting deeper than she expected. Because it is true, she whispered. Even if you don't remember, it happened. You and I, we loved each other. We planned a future. You told me we'd figure everything out together. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of it all. This is too much, he said quietly. I can't process it. Allie nodded, understanding but breaking inside. I know it's a lot, she said. But I thought you deserved to know. I didn't come here to force anything on you. I just needed you to hear it from me. Noah stared at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with confusion and something else, fear. You seem so sure, he said softly. Like you really know me. Her voice trembled. I do know you. I know your laugh, your kindness, your dreams. You used to paint late at night, remember? You said you felt most alive when you were creating. You told me once that being with me made you want to be better. His lips parted slightly as if her words stirred something deep inside. He closed his eyes, and for a second flashes of memory seemed to flicker in his mind. Her smile, their hands intertwined, the sound of her laughter echoing through the gallery. But when he opened his eyes again, the clarity was gone, leaving only confusion. I wish I could remember, he said hoarsely. It sounds like we had something incredible. She reached out this time, unable to hold back. Her fingers brushed his hand gently. We did, she whispered. And maybe one day you'll remember. But even if you don't, our story isn't over. Tears welled in his eyes, a rare vulnerability breaking through. You really believe that? He asked. She nodded firmly, even though her heart felt like it was breaking all over again. I have to, she said. Because I'm not just fighting for us anymore. I'm fighting for our baby too. Later, when Sharon returned to the room, she could tell something had shifted. Noah looked quieter, more introspective, while Allie's expression was a mix of sorrow and strength. Sharon glanced between them. Everything okay? She asked gently. Allie nodded, though her eyes told a different story. I told him, she said softly. Sharon froze, understanding dawning in her eyes. About the baby? Allie nodded again. Sharon's face softened with emotion. Oh, sweetheart. After Sharon stepped out again, Noah turned toward Allie. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to be the person you need. She reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek. You don't have to be perfect, she said. Just be open. Let your heart remember, even if your mind can't yet. He studied her for a long time, his voice low. And what if I never remember? What if I can't give you what you need? She smiled sadly. Then I'll still be grateful. Because even if you never remember, you gave me something that will always remind me of us. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach. The next few days were a blur of uncertainty and pain. Allie visited daily, bringing him coffee, talking softly about moments from their past. She showed him photos, told stories about their first date at Crimson Lights, the way he surprised her with a painting of the two of them under a sunset. Sometimes he smiled faintly, as if a flicker of recognition tried to surface. Other times he looked distant, lost in the maze of his fractured memories. Yet Allie never gave up. She believed that somewhere inside him, the man she loved was still there, waiting to find his way back. One afternoon, as autumn sunlight spilled into the room, Noah reached for her hand without thinking. His touch startled her. He looked down, frowning slightly as if surprised by his own instinct. "It feels familiar," he murmured. "Holding your hand, it feels right." Allie's breath caught. "That's because it is right," she whispered. For the first time a real smile curved his lips, small but genuine. "Maybe I don't need all the memories to know that," he said softly. In that fragile moment, hope bloomed again inside her. Maybe love really could find its way through even the darkest corners of loss. Maybe the bond they shared went deeper than memory. She knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, pain, and days when the past felt impossibly out of reach. But as she looked at him, she realized that the future, uncertain as it was, still belonged to them. The accident might have taken his memories, but it couldn't erase their love. As she stood to leave, he called her name. "Allie." She turned, her heart leaping at the sound of her name on his lips. "Yes." He hesitated, then said softly, "I don't know you, but I want to." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of hope. "Then that's enough," she whispered. "We'll start over." Outside the room, Sharon watched from a distance, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She could see it, the spark between them, fragile yet undeniable. Life had thrown them one of its cruelest twists, but maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter. Noah would find his way back, piece by piece, memory by memory. And when he did, he'd remember that Allie was the one person who never gave up on him. For Allie, the road ahead was uncertain, but she was ready. She had already lost him once. This time she would fight to bring him back. Not just for herself, but for the tiny heartbeat that connected them forever. And as she walked out of the hospital, she whispered softly to herself, "He may not know me now, but one day he will. And when he does, he'll remember that our love was worth every moment of pain." The story of Allie and Noah wasn't over. It was just beginning again, one heartbeat, one memory, one miracle at a time. The gentle lapping of the lake against the wooden pillars of the boathouse was a sound that had once been the soundtrack to their happiest moments. A rhythmic, soothing melody that spoke of summer afternoons and whispered promises under a blanket of stars. Now, as Allie stood on the familiar, weathered planks, the sound felt hollow, a cruel mockery of the peace it once offered. Her hand, trembling slightly, rested on the subtle, firm curve of her belly, a secret she had carried across miles, a truth she had believed would be her anchor in this storm. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind during the long journey. The shock on his face, the dawning joy, the way he would pull her into his arms, his hands finding the life they had created together. The reality unfolding before her was a distorted funhouse mirror version of that dream. A scene so jarring and wrong that her mind struggled to even process the sensory information it was receiving. He was just there, Noah Newman, looking exactly as he always had, yet fundamentally terrifyingly different. He wasn't rushing towards her with that familiar, easy smile. He wasn't looking at her with the deep, soulful recognition that had always made her feel seen in a world full of strangers. Instead, he stood by the doorway, his posture not one of welcome, but of polite, detached inquiry. His head was tilted slightly, his brow furrowed in a look of mild, confused curiosity, the kind one might offer a delivery person at the door or a tourist asking for directions. The air between them, usually so charged with unspoken understanding, was now thick with a vacuum of silence, a chasm of the unknown that seemed to stretch wider with every passing second. Allie's heart, which had been hammering a frantic, hopeful rhythm against her ribs, suddenly seemed to stutter and slow, a cold dread seeping into her veins where warm anticipation had been. "Noah." The name left her lips as a fragile question, a single syllable laden with all the hope and fear that had warred within her for months. It was a plea, a prayer, a desperate attempt to bridge the impossible gap she felt opening up between them. She took a hesitant step forward, her eyes searching his, looking for any flicker, any spark of the man she loved in the depths of those familiar blue eyes. What she found there made her breath catch in her throat. There was no spark. There was only a flat, placid emptiness, a polite blankness that was more frightening than any anger or rejection could have ever been. It was the look of a man regarding a complete stranger, and in that moment, the ground beneath Allie's feet felt less solid than the shifting waters of the lake below. He didn't flinch at the sound of his name. He didn't react to the tremor in her voice. He simply continued to regard her with that infuriating, soul-crushing calm. "Can I help you?" he finally asked, his voice even and pleasant, devoid of any of the unique cadences and emotional undertones that made it his voice. It was like hearing a beautifully rendered recording that lacked a soul. The simple, commonplace question landed with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from Allie's lungs. Help her? He was her help. He was her partner, her future, the father of her child. The sheer mundane normality of the phrase in the face of their catastrophic reality was almost laughable, if it weren't so utterly devastating. "It's me," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of a despair so profound it felt like a physical weight on her chest. She gestured weakly to herself, as if she could physically manifest her identity in the space between them. "Allie, don't you know me?" The question hung in the air, fragile and desperate. She watched his face, her own a canvas of pleading hope, every muscle taut with the need for him to break, to smile, to say it was all some terrible twisted joke. But his expression didn't change. If anything, it became more guarded, a subtle shift as he processed her distress not as something personal, but as a problem to be managed. A slow, apologetic smile touched his lips, a smile that was meant to be reassuring but felt like a dagger twisting in her heart. It was the kind of smile one offers to calm a distressed child or a confused elderly person. "I'm sorry," he said, and the apology was so genuine, so utterly free of the guilt or pain it should have carried, that it was somehow worse than cruelty. "There was an accident a while back. My memory, it's got some significant gaps." He said it so casually, as if he were explaining a minor scheduling conflict, not the total annihilation of their shared history. He gestured vaguely towards his head. "The doctors say it's a form of amnesia. Things are missing." The word missing echoed in the silence of the boathouse. Missing. It was such a small, tidy word for the cataclysm it represented. Their first kiss by the lake wasn't a cherished memory. It was missing. The long nights talking about their dreams, the comfort they found in each other during times of family turmoil, the whispered confession of love, the plans they had spun for a future together. All of it was just missing. Erased. As if it had never happened. Allie felt the truth of it sink in, cold and heavy, settling in the pit of her stomach, right next to the child they had created in a moment of love that now existed only in her own solitary memory. She was the sole keeper of their story, a librarian in a library where all the books had been burned, their contents existing only as fragile, fading echoes in her own mind. Her gaze involuntarily dropped to her stomach, her hand splaying protectively over the small firm swell. This was the most tangible proof of their love, the physical manifestation of their most intimate connection. If their past was missing, what did that mean for this? What was this child to him? If not the culmination of a deep and abiding love, it was now a biological fact disconnected from any emotion or history, a consequence of an event he could not recall. The beautiful secret she had been nurturing, the hope that had sustained her, now felt like a looming, complicated problem. How do you tell a man he is going to be a father when he doesn't even know he was ever your lover? "Noah," she said again, her voice firmer now, laced with a desperate urgency. She needed to reach him, to find a crack in this impenetrable wall his mind had built. "You have to try. Please. Look at me. Really look at me. Do you feel anything? Anything at all?" She took another step closer, invading his personal space, willing some deep primal part of his brain to recognize her scent, her presence, the very essence of who she was to him. She saw his eyes drop to her lips as she spoke, a flicker of something in their depths. Was it confusion? A faint stirring of a feeling he couldn't name? Or was it just discomfort at the intensity of her emotion? He took a slight, almost imperceptible step back, a subtle reestablishment of boundaries that felt like a mile-wide chasm. I'm sorry," he repeated, and the repetition was a torture all its own. "I don't. I wish I did. It's disorienting when people know you and you can't reciprocate." He was apologizing for his own victimhood, for the inconvenience his condition caused others, and the sheer tragic nobility of it was unbearable. He was the one who had been injured, who had lost a fundamental part of himself, and here she was demanding that he remember, forcing her pain upon his. The imbalance of it all was dizzying. Tears she had been fighting now welled in her eyes, hot and insistent, blurring his handsome face. She had come here for comfort, for strength to build a future. Instead, she found herself alone in a room with a kind, handsome stranger who bore the face of the man she loved, a living ghost haunting the ruins of their relationship. The future they had planned, the nursery they had joked about painting, the names they had debated late into the night. It all crumbled into dust, leaving only the stark, terrifying present. She was pregnant, alone, and in love with a man who no longer existed. "There's so much you're forgetting," she whispered, the tears finally spilling over and tracing hot paths down her cheeks. So much that mattered. Her hand remained on her stomach, a silent, desperate communication. He followed the movement, his eyes lingering on the shape of her body, the subtle proof of a past he could not access. For the first time, his expression shifted from polite confusion to a dawning, more complex realization. He was putting the pieces together, her emotional distress, her intimate use of his name, the visible pregnancy. The puzzle was forming a picture, but it was a picture without context, without feeling. "Are you?" he began, his voice hesitant now, losing its previous clinical calm. "Are you saying that you and I?" He couldn't finish the sentence, his gaze locked on her abdomen. The question hung in the air, stark and clinical. He wasn't asking if they were in love. He wasn't asking if they were happy. He was asking for a biological and historical fact. The poetry of their relationship had been stripped away, leaving only the bare, uncomfortable prose. Allie could only nod, a slow, miserable dip of her chin, more tears falling in response to his halting, incomplete question. The confirmation seemed to physically affect him. He took a full step back now, his own face paling slightly as the magnitude of the situation, not emotionally but factually, began to dawn on him.